Hello, friends. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut. I'm Michael Woods, and in this episode, we have a return guest. It is Dr. Bill Kreuser from the GreenKeeper app.
Micah, great to be here again today.
I am glad to talk with you about something that we first were talking about in February. We were in Montreal at the Canadian show, and we were down in one of the coffee breaks or social events, and you told me about a new feature that was going to come into the GreenKeeper app.
Yeah, so I've always wanted water and water guidance, irrigation guidance to be part of GreenKeeper. And it's something that we've been working towards developing into GreenKeeper for a long time. But one of the biggest issues was we needed some really good forecast ET data to drive those models. And fortunately, we were able to find a weather provider that gives us global water use forecast data to make ET-based irrigation a lot more practical than it's been. It's been a very highly recommended practice to water based on ET or evapotranspiration, the amount of plant water use and soil drying. But in actuality, it's very difficult with the technology that we've had up to this point, to implement that strategy very effectively. And the ability to now forecast ET has opened some doors to us to kind of predict where soil moisture is going to go, and then further continue to guide irrigation scheduling.
Yeah, it's something that's really exciting, and I think for me, because I'm always working in the metric system, it was very obvious how ET and soil water content are connected, because it's a certain volume of water. The soil water content is expressed as volumetric water content, which is a volume of water per volume of soil. And when you put irrigation, or when rain falls, that is a volume of water. And when water is evaporated or used by the grass, transpired by the grass, that, we usually express it as a depth of water, but if it's depth over a certain area, then it becomes volume. So everything is actually in the same units, and it's very simple math to match them up. And so one of them is going to go down, and that water has to come from somewhere. And so it comes from the soil. So the soil will go down by exactly the amount that the evapotranspiration was. That's the idea. But it's always been very difficult. Where do I get my forecast ET for tomorrow? Because your weather stations are recording the weather conditions that have already happened, and they're generally, you're looking at ET that's happened in the past and then just replacing it. But if you want to predict in the future how the soil water content is going to go down, you need to look at the forecast ET. So this is something that I've always wanted to do too, and I don't have a team of developers to put that into Pace Turf or into a ATC type of service. And I was so excited to find out that you were going to be doing that in GreenKeeper.
Yeah, we like everything. It all starts as Excel sheets usually, or in making equations and proving it out to yourself. And so for years, we've had like a checkbook Excel sheet where you could put in what the ET was yesterday and what your soil moisture was, and then see a prediction as to where you think it will go at the end of the day. But again, like you said, it's all backwards looking, right? The ET in your irrigation computer was from the past day. And so you might know yesterday you lost a 1/4 inch of water, and you could decide to then replace it. But you wouldn't even get that information until you come into the shop the next day, and at which point your system should have ran. So you're always about 2 days behind by just looking at past data, because the data is not coming in until midnight, and then you're not there to then adjust your run times after that data comes in. So it's just been really, really difficult. So if you're a superintendent, I think when we're thinking about watering, what we're really trying to do is get to a point where I want to get through the rest of the day without it wilting, right? That's the core goal as a turf manager. I want to maybe dry things out, maybe to increase firmness, to reduce disease pressure, to increase puttability of a green. But I don't want to have too little in the morning that I'm not going to be able, I'm going to have to be hand watering in the afternoon. So we wanted some kind of guidance where you could, go in with your moisture meter, take those readings, and then predict with an hourly forecast ET to say, where do we think the moisture is going to be at 4 p.m.? Or one of the things that Doug Soldat is, pioneered in thinking with this was, well, how many hours is it going to be till I expect it to wilt? Really, I mean, those are the key questions that we were talking about as we were thinking about this watering tool. And then getting the access to these hourly weather data allows us to make those predictions. And the reason we can't just look back at yesterday's ET to predict what tomorrow's is going to be is, the weather is always changing. And some of the biggest factors that drive water use in a plant is sunlight. That is, the day length, the intensity of the sun, cloud cover, and that's a lot more transient from day to day. And so it can really have a huge impact on how much water is lost. If you're in a very dry desert climate with few clouds, maybe that's more consistent. But any kind of a humid climate where you can have big changes in temperatures, sunlight, wind speed, direction, you might have big differences in your ET. And so we've known this. I mean, if we were going to go set up our golf course for the day and we look at the forecast and see it's going to be hot, sunny, and windy, you might say, I want to start my greens out at maybe 18% moisture to get them a good base. And if it's going to be a cloudy, rainy day with low wind and high humidity, you stick a moisture meter in the ground, see it's only a couple points above your wilt point, who cares? You're not going to lose much water that day. So you're not out there trying to add water, even though it may have been hot and sunny yesterday. So that's kind of the basis for the approach to this forecasted ET watering method.
So you got that into the app a couple of months ago. So it's ready for this year's peak irrigation season in the Northern Hemisphere.
It is, yeah. And so it uses some variables like estimated root depth, crop coefficient, wilt point, field capacity, how much the soil is going to hold after a heavy irrigation or rainfall event if you let it dry down for, say, 12 hours. If we know those factors, we can pull in weather data. If we then take a measurement of what the moisture is, a snapshot of maybe the average of an entire green. So you go out, you measure all of your greens, you say they're around 17%. You put it into the software, it projects forward the next 4 days to give you some kind of indication as to when you think you're going to see wilt. Is it going to be this afternoon, tomorrow, the next day? And then you can schedule and put an irrigation runtime in there, and then it will show how the irrigation depth will further change those values.
And how has the response been from users? Because this is something that I'm very excited about, and I thought it is a really cool feature. And I've found that sometimes turfgrass managers aren't actually paying as much attention to ET or to irrigation depth as much as maybe I think that I assumed that they were paying attention to it more than they are. Let me just phrase it that way. So I wonder if adding this feature is something that people are really making use of, or it's something that is not so exciting for them yet.
Well, we've launched now for about a week, or for about a month, really. It's only been, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. We have over 2,500 entries so far. So people, as they're starting to get into their normal watering, and across North America, where predominantly a lot of our clients are, we've had some pretty consistent rainfall. So there hasn't even really been a big irrigation demand across on much of the country. But people are putting in those values, and then they're able to see where things are going, and that's great because we like I said, we have some estimates for, say, a bent POA green will have this deep of rooting and a crop coefficient of, say, 80%. But we know that those numbers are actually going to change across different sites, different exposures. A green that's maybe facing southwest might have a crop coefficient closer to 1. A shaded green's crop coefficient might be less. And so by the end users continuously adding more data to the system, it starts to then learn, well, how do these greens respond to their water use? So for example, you measure your moisture at 6 in the morning, and then you're leaving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon um, to go home, and you go measure again, and you see that the soil moisture went from 15% to 12%. And you go into GreenKeeper and you see that the model predicted it was going to be 13%, and you put in 12. Well, now by you giving that extra piece of information, now it starts to understand, well, maybe the greens at this golf course use water a little bit faster, or their root depth may be a little bit incorrect. And so it starts to make small adjustments into those factors. And so by continually using these and entering data, it starts to fit a model specific to your areas of your golf course.
And does one how many zones does one get? Is it infinite? Like can I have 18 different greens, or is it like greens, fairways, tees?
Yeah, so right now we have it across greens, fairways, tees. If you're in GreenKeeper and you wanted to do a specific green, you could make a new management zone. So we've done this for some of the research golf courses where we'll make a new management zone, like 8 green water model. And we don't use it for anything else except for to plug in 8 greens water. And so that's a way we can get to it. With our GreenKeeper CIS, which is our new kind of geospatial platform. We're going to then expand this into individual greens and then link it directly to soil moisture sensors. So if you're out on green 8, you would see what green 8's moisture is, and then start to run the model. And we have ambitions to expand this even further into irrigation head localization and scaling. And so this is where we're actively researching, crop mounted sensors for both canopy reflectance and health and soil moisture status, so that we could automate the data collection validation part of this and scale it across all of the heads at your golf course. So this is kind of the big ambitions and goals that we're actively doing research to achieve.
I think the in-ground soil moisture sensors seem so much more efficient than having to go around with a portable soil moisture meter and then have to manually input the data. So if the system is just keeping track of what's going on, then the system should be able, because we have a sensor in the soil, it should be more efficient that way, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and there's pluses and minuses. So we have our researchers actually every morning, they just came back in. They are measuring soil moisture with the TDR across 2 fairways at a 18-hole facility near my house in Lincoln. And then we overlay the crop maps we get from the mower mounted sensors. We overlay the irrigation heads, and then we run these models on individual irrigation zones. And so we're actively doing that. And so those handheld GPS enabled sensors are still really helpful. But then when you're trying to figure out that optimization part, how is that plant using water? Then the in-ground sensors offer a lot of opportunities, because we can be continuously logging hourly and then seeing, what is the predicted value relative to what is that static value at that spot in the ground. So it does give us another nice metric. So I think both tools are really important. I think some of the mower mounted soil moisture sensor opportunities will kind of be the best of both worlds too. But anyway, we can pull those data in. They just allow a greater validation for our modeling.
And the mower mounted sensors, are they measuring plant or soil or both?
So we currently have a system that is measuring the plant side. So it's canopy reflectance, and so it's detecting drought. And so what the approach that we use is we generate these maps. We're doing it at various golf courses that are kind of early adopters of our tech. And then we go and send them out to a couple spots that may be a little bit low, a little bit high in terms of the plant vigor, density, chlorophyll status, and then have them rank those areas either thumbs up or thumbs down. And that information can be pumped into a logistic regression probability model again, so that we can then try to figure out what's the probability of this area needing more or less irrigation. And so that is where a lot of this active research is going, and it's really helping the software learn about your site. It's one thing to sit and collect data from drones and satellites and even handheld moisture meters, but you still need to take those values and turn them into something that means something to the manager, that drive a management decision. And so you need to know things like, where is the wilt point? How much water can this hold? Is this variability because of water or fertilizer or cart traffic, or some kind of a pest? And so the little bit of scouting, it doesn't need to be scout 1,000 spots. If it's scout a couple spots a day, every single day, then the software really tunes into what's going on at your facility.
And this is something that's commercially available, the sensors?
Yep. Yes. So we have that commercially available now, and as we're scaling it out, we are working directly with Michael Carlson, who's our research manager, and he's helping with the mapping. And so it's a very one-on-one. This is part of these early adopters, as we're then learning the best ways to interpret, visualize these data coming in. And then we're building them with our software team into the software, so that we're not building something and then going, okay, great, I made some pretty pictures. What do I do with it? And so we're complementing each other nicely this summer as we continue to scale and sell more and more of these sensor systems.
Yeah, you have to sell it to me a little bit more, because I just don't quite get how I can use it as a golf course superintendent yet. And I know lots of people are interested in being early adopters and using this kind of stuff. It's like the irrigation prediction. I really understand that the
Yep.
sensors. I just don't.
So for example,
Because it's going to find. Well, yeah, you give me a sales on why. For I'm a golf course superintendent on an 18-hole facility. Why? Tell me what. So I put the sensor. Just tell me what it is, what it's called, and why I should have one.
Okay. So this is a Holland Scientific crop sensor. It's a reflectance meter. It's measuring plant density and chlorophyll status, and it's detecting early onset drought. So we have it on the back of the mower. It automatically turns itself on as soon as the mower cranks and leaves the shop area, and then it goes out and collects, tens of thousands of measurements, on a pretty small sampling size. And then we bring those back in and we crop them around the irrigation heads. So recently we noticed a couple of the areas were showing a reduction in turf vigor. The chlorophyll levels were still high, but we're still seeing this reduction. So we look at those two and go, well, what's going on here? So we went out with our moisture meter, took a couple of measurements there. Sure enough, that area was a little drier. So we were able to correlate what we were seeing from the plant response to a soil level. We did an audit to one of the irrigation heads was keyed off, the other one nozzle set was broken. Went in there and were able to then fix that specific spot. And so by having that chart to see that, we knew exactly where we needed to direct our attention and discovered that there were some issues. And then we're using that same approach for scheduling irrigation, where you're out measuring with the sensor, and we're seeing what areas are kind of starting to lose vigor. And through some basic scouting with the superintendent, then we start to figure out, which heads need to be turned up or down. So we're doing runtime adjusts on individual sprinkler heads to try to really optimize our inputs. And sometimes they might go out there and see that it's low vigor and it might be something else, and that's fine. But we're just helping to identify all of these spots at a golf course that need some attention. When you have 40 acres of fairways and thousands of sprinkler heads, sometimes you need a little bit of direction to say which ones do we want to, give a little bit more attention to. They might be out of adjustment. They might need to adjust their runtime. Maybe there's some environmental condition here that's different that requires a different level of support. So that's where the sensors are going. It is, that is big picture, long-term where we're taking it. So we have about a dozen courses now that have implemented these systems. And then we're working and learning together. We can also use it for fertility applications. That was a big part. We did that research for 5 years. Similar approach. We're using a different bandwidth on that crop sensor to estimate chlorophyll. And then we're only fertilizing parts of a fairway as needed. And we did that. We reduced our fertility by 80% over a 3-year period, just by going out and targeting only spots that had low chlorophyll and needed a little bit extra fertilizer. So really good for broad areas like fairways, especially with a GPS sprayer. And then greens are such a small space. I think things like clipping volume and just visually ranking the greens performance is probably sufficient for such a highly managed small zone.
Oh, thank you. That is a very good explanation, and it does make it clear for me, or more clear, because when you said imagine 40 acres of fairways and a couple, a few thousand sprinkler heads, and then you have stressful growing environment, and it would be useful to get a heads up of your problem areas before they get too bad. So the sensors are going to pick those up for you, I think, and give you a heads up. Go check these areas before it gets too bad, and now you have to spend 2 weeks hand watering that area to bring some grass back.
Exactly. And again, this is where you need to pair the two together. You need the sensors and you need the local expertise of the superintendent to help train the models. Just like your moisture meter, the day that a superintendent first bought it and put it into their greens and pushed read, and it gave them a number like 12.4%. Because they had no experience with that technology before on that course, they don't know what that means. It's only after routine measurement and taking those measurements and correlating them to what your eyes are telling you about. Are you seeing wilt? Are you seeing stress? But then you start to understand, oh yeah, when we get moisture values maybe at 8%, that's when wilt starts showing up. And after a heavy rainfall, I expect the greens to drain down to maybe 28%. Right? Then we're getting context to the number, and now it's powerful. And that's why golf courses went from saying, why do we need these moisture probes, to pretty much every golf course in the country now has a moisture probe, at least one, because they were able to take something like a data metric point and then apply it across to be useful in making a management decision. And I think that this water model is just taking that to the next level. We do know that a volumetric water, like you said, is a volume of water in the soil depth. And so if we plug that in, we can just use some basic checkbook accounting for precipitation, evapotranspiration, overhead irrigation, to then predict where are those soil moisture levels going. Just like a bank account, money in, money out. That's essentially what we're doing with soil water status.
Bill, with this being the ATC double cut, I didn't really have a specific post that I wanted to give the double cut treatment here, but let's change the screen for a minute, and I'm going to show the irrigation tag on the ATC website and point out one post that if people are interested in this, they can check out the way that I've made some calculations about this. If you go to the ATC website, and if you go to up at the top, you'll find a menu, and you can go to blog, and you can go down to topic list. And if you click on the topic list, it will bring you to a word cloud of some tagged topics. These are the ones that are, I think there's 60 or something, the 60 most commonly tagged topics. And the page on the ATC website that I'm going to give the double cut treatment to in this post is, in this episode is the irrigation tag. So if you go to the irrigation tag, you're going to find all of the posts on the ATC website that are about irrigation, and there's many of them. We could scroll down the screen and we could go to the next page, and I think we could go. I'm sure there's a third page, a fourth page. There's many pages, many posts about water. And the specific one that I want us to look at real quick, if you're interested in this, well, let's see. You just talked about basically soil water balance. So the third one down is soil volumetric water content estimate by a soil water balance. That's something that people can check out. It's like a checkbook because you're just looking at what's there, what's lost, and what's added. Specifically, though, I want to show one from about a year ago called Hourly Evapotranspiration, Soil Water Content, and Crop Coefficients. And I made some charts that people can look at what the hourly evapotranspiration was, what the daily total ET was, and then I showed how the soil water content went down on two different greens. One green is mostly shaded, one green is in more sun. And so I worked through the calculations. I've already done a double cut post about this, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But if you're interested in this, please check these out because they show the types of calculations that are similar to what Bill and I have been talking about. And it's the kind of stuff that I do manually, but with GreenKeeper, you can get these type of calculations automatically.
Yep, exactly. And there's plenty of things to have to be aware of. We do have hourly forecast ET data, and so let's just talk about that. We pull the ensemble models. So what is a weather ensemble? So there's different weather models. They have various accuracies and they have various levels of time scale. So we have some very high resolution models that run for about 18 hours into the future, and they update hourly. And then we have longer range models that cover the globe that can go out several weeks. So in GreenKeeper, we pick the highest resolution model as it's available. So within the next 18 hours, we have really high resolution, high accuracy models. But still, a model is not perfect. All models are wrong, but they give us some more guidance than we would have if we were just flipping a coin or guessing. So what an ensemble model is means they take that weather model and they just tweak the start data just slightly in various directions. And they see how does that model predict forward. And so what happens is they do it 40 different tweaks of some of the initializing data and see where things are going to go. So in GreenKeeper, then we actually predict where soil moisture is going, and we can even give you a confidence interval of low or high based on the uncertainty within the weather models. And so this is all happening real time. 40 different model data sets are coming in for every single hour to give that superintendent some guidance. The idea though here is let's not make this hard for the end user, right? Superintendents are busy enough. They don't have time to sit there and chug through this math. So they can just put in the moisture today at 6 a.m. was 14%, push go and let it do the hundreds of calculations to show where things are going over the next 4 days. And so it really simplifies, what they're trying to accomplish. So they're getting the guidance without all the headache.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's really cool. Thank you for explaining that so well. And I saw you also have added some disease risk into your program builder. How detailed is that?
Yeah, so I think when you're a superintendent, you're building an agronomic program, you're thinking about, you say you're in North America and it's a cool season region, it's the winter and you're planning out your whole program for next year. What are you thinking? You're thinking when am I likely to see certain pests, diseases, insects, when I need to spray for particular weeds. And so in your mind, you can have this kind of long timeline that is your growing season. And in that timeline, you can say, okay, yeah, in July, we have a lot of brown patch, we have a lot of Pythium root rot. So I want to target applications to control those diseases. And I want to do, select products that are really efficacious. I want to make sure I'm rotating my resistance groups so we don't start to develop resistance as best as we possibly can. And so we built this Gantt chart style where at the top of the pest view in Program Builder, it shows the predicted pest outbreak risk. And then below you have the bar, and a bar represents an application of, say, Densicor or Segway or whatever fungicide or pesticide you're going to use. And the duration of that bar then shows if you're covered or not for that pest. And every time you make another application, they stack below. So you can clearly see if you have gaps in your program, and make sure you're doing good rotation, and make sure that when you're making an application, it's during a period of time at which there is significant pressure for that pest. So the pest data has been coming from the things like Smith-Kearns model or historical type models, like in certain times of the year in the Northeast U.S. we'd see anthracnose. Well, what's the weather like? So what we did is we pulled all the weather records for those times of the year and then coded it into GreenKeeper to give a rough level of risk for many different pests that a golf course superintendent might be trying to prevent over the course of the year.
So if I'm in Mexico City, no, Mexico City gets cool. If I'm in Cabo San Lucas, is it going to be predicting pink snow mold, or it's going to know that in my temperatures there, I'm unlikely to get pink snow mold?
Yeah, so for right now, we have it based on, again, we took a lot of historical type disease guide information, and so I actually plotted out 20 different locations around North America, from east to west, north to south, and then went through and then coded based on local extension publications to say what diseases would you expect at different months, and then pulled in what is the average humidity and temperature in those months. And so it's going to look at what the 5-day average temperature and the 5-day average humidity is for any given day. And so if you're down in Cabo and it's hot but it's dry, it's not going to be giving you a pink snow mold. It's probably not going to be giving you a Smith-Kearns or a brown patch if it's been dry too. And so it is using both of those factors. But the exciting part about this is we've received 5,000 sample submissions from various turf diagnostic labs in the United States, and they go back for over a decade. And so now we know what the pest was at a location. We know what the grass species was. We can pull the weather records, hourly weather records now with this new weather axis we have, for the 14 days prior to sample submission. And so we're actually using machine learning to make predictions for every single disease based on the sample submission records that we're getting from a bunch of these university labs. So we're going to get a lot better granularity into the ability to predict when are we going to see an outbreak of a pest based on factors like weather, and hopefully we can even expand it to other things like management data, fertility records, clipping volume. I'm sure would have a big influence. And so as people start reporting their pests too, we can continue to refine. And that's where GreenKeeper is going now, is we really are trying to take data in and then make some sense of it. We have millions of lines of weather data, for example. We should be able to pair that with disease observations, weed observations, growth rate observations, to then provide predictive power as what's likely to happen in the future at your specific location.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm advising a company in Japan that developed a software, and they make some disease risk, but predictions based on weather also. and it's interesting to try to do that. Pace Turf also does that, where Pace Turf is just using threshold temperatures of just saying your forecast temperature for the next 5 days is within the range where you could expect this particular disease to be active. And so I have, through Pace Turf, I have a couple of accounts set to different locations, and it's interesting to watch that change through the year. And where I am now in southern Thailand, which I have one of my locations set to here, there, because of the high temperatures and humidity, there is about 20 diseases that I'm at high risk of all the time. And another one of my locations is set in Oregon. And in Oregon, in the wintertime, it will go down to just down to snow molds. And then as the temperatures get a little bit warmer in the spring, it's interesting to see the other diseases get added on. So, yeah, I think, you see, like, sometimes I watch Frank Rossi's Cornell Turfgrass show, and I see they do their update and look at the Northeast Regional Climate Center, and then they've got some disease risk there, and you look at that, and it's like, oh, right, but they're only predicting for 5 diseases, so they're doing dollar spot, anthracnose, brown patch, or something. And it's interesting to try to do something that's going to work in Morocco, and it's going to work in Miami, and it's going to work in Minneapolis, and it's going to work in Manitoba. You have to consider all the diseases, all the grasses, and all the weather. So it's cool. You're doing something very ambitious, and it sounds like you've got a good plan to make some serious progress with this.
Yeah, having access to these weather records has been just a game changer for us. For example, it's hard you can get the average temperature at any location in the world usually pretty quickly in a Google search. What's the 30-year average humidity in July 15th in Phoenix, Arizona, or Lincoln, Nebraska? That's a hard thing to get. You can't find it very easily. And so what we ended up doing is we just built our own average humidity. So we pulled 30 years of hourly weather data from every one of our client courses. So this, was a significant amount of processing time to pull in all of this hourly data over 30 years. And then we averaged what it was for every single hour of every single day for every single course. And so now we have the average humidity by the hour for all of our clients. And if you sign up for GreenKeeper, it runs the query and calculates your average. And so then when you go into this pest view, you can go forward in time and see the bar colors change as the snow mold starts off at the beginning of the year, and then that goes down, and we see take all and summer patch and root issues start to flare up in the spring, and then we go to the Pythium root rots and the brown patch and the Pythium blights in the middle of the summer. The dollar spot starts to ramp up, and then it goes back towards your root diseases and back to snow mold in a climate like Lincoln. And so it's really cool how you can actually see that. And those risk models will just get better by community-based scouting and reporting, and leveraging these sample submission records that we're receiving from university labs. So it's a fun, ambitious project. But even when I was making some of the rough assumptions of say like brown patch, I'd use some conditional formatting, some coloring of the cells in Excel to figure out, when is the extension bulletin saying that, say, brown patch is really likely, and you would, filter by temperature, humidity, and see, okay, this is kind of the bracketed temperature, humidity where we see a lot of brown patch pressure. Sure, there's going to be other important factors like rainfall, recency, cloud cover, but just basically on just temperature, humidity, moving averages, you can really see that it starts to scale across many regions across North America and hopefully globally with the different weather metrics. So,
yeah, it's easy to make. Well, it's hard. Anybody listening to this will realize that if you follow what Bill's talking about, it's not easy to deal with these millions and millions of data points. So it's. I'm not saying that's easy, but the computers can make it much easier than it would be if we were trying to do that with pen and paper. But the point that I try to make is with computers we can make a lot of predictions with models, and it's interesting to see if they're useful enough and accurate enough to really be something that we want to use, right? So it's like predicting organic matter, right? There's various ways of predicting organic matter change. DryJect has that one that you put in GreenKeeper, and then the question is if you actually put the data in, does it predict organic matter very well? And then I make a different way of calculating organic matter change because I think that the change in total organic material over time, and if we know how much sand we've put, then we can calculate just kind of like a soil water balance. We know our inputs and we know what the decline should be. So we know our site specific rate of organic matter change. So we can assume that site specific organic matter change rate is going to continue. So we can then predict what's going to happen if we add a certain amount of sand or don't add a certain amount of sand. These type of things, it's easy to make these calculations, but then are they right? So we always have to we just have to keep checking it, and that sounds like you're making a lot of predictions about soil water content, about disease, various things, and then you're able to get some of this validation data from your clients. So
and the water model is the first for that, and so we have if someone's using it, and I don't know if we can screen share or not, but if you push the GK Insight on, it does that. It does that. So it does that fitting. It validates. It helps to refine the model for your specific course by taking the 100 or the dozens of measurements of, say, soil moisture in this example. You flip it on, and it realizes, okay, crop coefficient is this, the root depth is most likely that. And it is trailing average. So if your root depth in August is less than it is now, it's going to have a different fit for August data than it would for, say, April data. So it's a pretty nice way to make sure that we can have a model, but then we can refine it to make sure it's reflecting what's happening in the field. And again, like you said, the computers can do this no problem. It's a headache for us. And that's where this is going. Hopefully make this as simple as possible. All you need to do is put in what your moisture is, put in an application you want to plan for pest control, and then be able to see, okay, is it covering these pests for this day? When is my grass going to wilt? That's what the end user really wants. They don't really care about all the actual math that's going on in the background. They just want to know that it's there and that we are continually checking it, verifying, and validating it so that they're not getting caught in a sticky situation.
Very good. I've got two more questions before we finish. I think last time we talked, we were talking about the wetting agent or the soil surfactant breakdown by growing degree days and the reapplication intervals by growing degree days. Are there any updates with that project?
Yeah, so we're continuing to do that research. We're continuing to do it at the Jim Egger Par 3 golf course. We've actually split the greens in half, and so there's like 10 different wetting agents spread out in different halves of all the greens at the golf course. And we're continuing to pull cores. We have literally thousands of them at my house drying right now that we're working through every day. One of the things that we have changed slightly in our modeling is we reduced the base temperature from 10C, which is a more liberal base temperature. We got a little bit more conservative. We went down to 7C when we were doing our fitting. It seemed to be a little bit better, especially in cooler climates like the UK, Pacific Northwest, where, you know, a 10C might be difficult to hit. And so the wetting agents would potentially live forever nearly. So 7 did a much better job of fitting that. They both had statistically the same. So we decided if the base is between 10 and 7, let's go to 7 so that an end user is more likely applying a little bit more frequently than the other side of base temperature of 10 would say that the wetting agent is still there and potentially it isn't. So that is the one change that we did as we were thinking through the modeling. Otherwise, a lot more data to collect and a lot more information to be gleaned, particularly about things like application rates too, and then what about mixtures of different wetting agents. So a lot still going on in that research area.
And that was a model that was based on one Simplot product, right? And is this
Yeah, the
do you
initial
expect it
one.
to do you expect it to work for basically for every soil surfactant, or do you expect big differences between products?
I expect differences between products, but I do expect the model to hold up. Essentially, this model is just measuring variability of the wettability of a green. And when we put down the wetting agents, we see the variability becomes reduced. And then as the wetting agent is slowly metabolized by soil microbes, the wettability of the green kind of returns to that pre-application state. And so we can use the same approach to predict, when do we see that return likely to happen? When should we reschedule? We did most of the modeling with Simplot's counteract firm wetting agent. We did a little bit with their Brilliance wetting agent, and we've done some very preliminary work with other wetting agents, and we're finding that this approach is working for all of them. But we're probably going to see different shapes in what those regression curves look like. For example, their Brilliance wetting agent is more of a linear product, and it seems like the performance expectation just is more of a linear decline over time, where their counteract has some unique structure and compared to other wetting agents, and so it seems to perform at a pretty high level for a longer period of time, and then really rapidly starts to lose that performance. And we think that might be a structure of the molecule itself versus traditional linear type of a molecule that might be more easily broken down by soil microbiology.
And if people wanted to use this type of stuff, do they have to, if they wanted to use these type of models, do they have to be a GreenKeeper subscriber, or is there anywhere that they can like scrape the data off a web page and then write it into their own Excel sheet? Or is this kind of proprietary?
I do have, it's a little bit of both, obviously, right? We're spending a ton of money on all this research, and it's not grant funded or anything. So, there is some information on our blog, greenkeeper.blog, where I try to explain things. You can easily look at that. We talk about base temperatures. You can see the figures for yourself for the model. So if you really are insistent in trying to do some of the stuff yourself, there's definitely resources out there. I do try to explain what's going on. I think if you're curious and you want to know what this means, that you should be able to get that further description. Otherwise, you can email me and we can work through it too. But it's real simple within GreenKeeper. If you put down a wetting agent in your normal application mix at say 8 ounces per thousand, then you just, once that application's made, you go to your wetting agent view and you'll see it being tracked right there. So there's no extra clicks or anything. When you're doing the mixing math and say you're going to make the app, it automatically does all that for you.
Okay. Thank you. And let's talk about plant growth regulators real quick with the summer coming up.
Sure.
I always forget what you've taught me about. Let's say we have the average high temperature is 35 degrees, and we've got bentgrass greens, and the average low temperature is 27 degrees Celsius. So when we have those kind of conditions and it's really hot, do we stay on our same PGR program, or do we give the grass a break?
This comes back to what I think you've really pioneered, which is the importance of clipping volume. So I'd like to stay on the intervals, but I adjust the rates depending. So if we are that warm and we're seeing the bentgrass, particularly the poinia, is really starting to slow down, and we're unhappy with it, our clipping volumes are starting to become reduced. Then I would start bringing those application rates back. You might, instead of mixing multiple PGRs together, like say anew and trim it, you might just take the trim it out and use simply the anew if we're seeing some damage on the grass. But what we see a lot of times is those temperatures increase. We see that mineralization flush, and we have a lot more vertical growth because of the abundance of soil nitrogen. And so in most scenarios, I'll be up actually increasing my rates during the summertime, trying to prevent that growth flush, because that's really wasteful. As that grass is growing, right? You're mowing all that nutrient off, you're mowing all that sugar out of the system. And so I'm trying to fight that as best as possible. And so what I generally find is that my trim it and my new applications, I'll start being at max label rates on standard intervals, versus the fall and the spring where it's more ideal. My growth rate might be slower. My intervals stretch out, and I'll be using a lot lighter rates of those materials because I don't need as much suppression. So track your clipping volume and let that be your guide for how much PGR goes in the tank, and continue to make your regular GDD applications.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the grass, if you look at clipping volume, the grass grows more when it should be dying. So if you look at the paste turf growth potential models, when temperatures get that high, the paste turf growth potential is going to say that the growth potential is about 25 or 30% for cool season grass. And what that means is it's experiencing extreme heat stress, and that's why you don't see creeping bentgrass in Singapore. You don't see creeping bentgrass greens in Bangkok, because in these kind of tropical places, you have 12 months of the year with those type of temperatures. And creeping bentgrass can survive this. And if you've got a good new variety that has really good heat tolerance, you can go 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks. It can survive those kind of tropical temperatures, but it can't survive 12 months of it. It can't survive 4, 5, 6 months of it. But what happens actually when it's that hot, your growth potential plummets and your clipping volume goes up. And I don't know if it's 100% because of nitrogen mineralization, because but it's certainly, you've got nitrogen mineralization and you just have high temperatures, and I think some of the physiological processes in the plant are happening more rapidly, and the grass just grows faster.
You can see that. So in GreenKeeper, we have a model that a grad student of mine had worked on. It's called the nitrogen responsiveness model, and we use same levels of nitrogen fertilizer in growth chambers at different temperatures. And so we'd see that bentgrass, if you put the same amount of nitrogen down, the growth chamber that would elicit the biggest surge in vertical growth and clipping production was when the temperatures were 25 to 28 C. So, upper 70s, lower 80s. So really warm. But then we know from like your growth potential and the physiology of a C3 plant that it's not making sugar there. And so we have this disconnect where the plant is very responsive to any amount of fertilizer at that heat level, but it's on the backside of the sugar production curve. And that's where people can get into trouble. This is why clipping volume is so important. You want to grow just enough grass to handle handle the traffic, the disease, not produce too much thatch, all the things that you've talked about and we've talked about together. And so if we can use our PGRs, that's helping conserve sugar and nutrients to help us get through those long periods in a climate like North Carolina, where you have really ideal weather all fall, winter, spring, but then you have a very hot summer, and you need to conserve those sugars to try to get back through to next fall. The example that I've seen even in Lincoln is we have a par 3 green in the shade. We have a green that's full sun. We measure clipping volume from both. In the spring, the shady green is growing 40% faster than the full sun green. It's trying to outgrow those trees in that shade. In the middle of the summer, it starts to deplete its sugar reserves, and we see that the levels start to become more similar, especially too as the sun gets higher and the shade isn't as intense. And then we get into August and September. Now that shady green is growing 50% slower than the full sun green, because it exhausted all of its sugar and nutrients trying to outgrow an oak tree. It's just a futile exercise. And so this is where using PGRs can be helpful in the spring. Put more PGR on that shady green to try to prevent that urge to outgrow a tree. And then in August, that's when I'll pull the Trim-It out of the tank and just use the Primo or the Anu, a little lighter product, because that green's already growing slower. It doesn't need the same amount of suppression as the other ones. So that's where, using the clipping volume can help see that and help to, extend the life of that green through the late summer, early fall.
I thought of another question, Bill,
Okay.
about clipping volume. I also agree that it's quite useful. And when I started recommending that in 2014, one of the first responses that people had, I was kind of embarrassed to recommend it because it sounds silly to put the clippings in a bucket at first. And everybody said, well, why can't we have a sensor for that? Why do we have to put it in a bucket? Can't we put a sensor? Can't we put a scale in the basket? Can't we put a laser light beam that counts the number of clippings that go across? And so the question that I have, because we talked about sensors earlier, and you're much more familiar with progress with that type of technology. Do you think, how far away is this industry from having automatic clipping volume measurement of some sort to where people don't need to put in a bucket? Or do you think it's just so simple and easy that 20 years from now, we might still be putting clippings into a bucket?
Yeah, I hope it is simple and easy. I hope we can figure out a way to automate it, not simply to just look at what the total is, but wouldn't it be great if you had it with your GPS receiver on your data logger? So now as you're mowing, you could even be getting a real-time yield map of even parts of a green or a fairway, just like a farmer does when they're cutting their crop, and they can see smaller grids of productivity. So all I can say is that I'm really fortunate to have a very good sensor manufacturer, Holland Scientific, very smart man. He's got his Ph.D. in biomedical engineering, and he's been building crop sensors for decades. And we're excited to work together to bring a whole suite of sensor systems to the golf market. So I'm really excited about some of those opportunities. And I hope that clipping volume automation is one that we can work on together.
That would be cool. I know a lot of people would appreciate that. For anybody watching this, I put up on the screen a QR code where it'll take you directly to the page on the ATC website where you can sign up for the free ATC newsletters, where you can get all kinds of information about this kind of stuff. We've been talking for long enough now, Bill. I think we both have other things to do. So do you have anything else before we sign off?
No, but I guess yes. If anyone's interested, greenkeeperapp.com, and we have a customer relationship manager, Mark Luce, who just joined our team. And if you're curious but seem intimidated by it, he's here to help get you set up and trained. So start your trial. We'll reach out and welcome you and make sure that you're using the software. And then you just say, hey, I want to use the water model. I want to see the pest view. How do I track clipping volume? We're here to help and continue to do a lot of active research that is going to help the turfgrass industry. So you supporting us allows us to continue to do the work that we're doing. So thank you very much. And thank you, Micah, for the opportunity to highlight some of the good work that our team has been striving to accomplish in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's impressive. And I'll put a direct link to your website in the show notes, so everybody can just click right through to that and check it out. And yeah, well, I'm sure you'll probably be developing some other very interesting things, and I'll want to schedule a call with you again as soon as possible once I hear about that. So I'm looking forward to getting that news from you, Bill.
Yeah, I'll keep you in the loop. So we have some great stuff coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening, for watching. Thanks, Bill, for joining us today and sharing so much really good information. I'll sign off now for ATC from Trong, Thailand. I'm Micah Woods. Bye-bye.